Welcome to another exciting episode of In Conversation with Alethia. I am your host, Alethia O'Hara-Stephenson. In each episode, I sit down with individuals from our communities who are doing amazing things. The show will educate, it will empower, and it will inspire you. On this episode, I am extremely honored and excited to have an amazing young woman who is a founder of Redefined. She's also an entrepreneur, social enterprise. She is a TEDx speaker, and so much more. She is none other than Ritika Saraswat. Ritika, welcome to In Conversation with Alethia. I'm so excited to have you.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Amazing. So I didn't do your bio justice. I want to take a little bit of time and have you talk a little bit more about who you are. We've talked about the fact that you're a two-time TEDx speaker. You've been on the cover of so many magazines, including Thrive. You've been able to sit on boards, globally. Can you share a little bit more about some of your background and your experience? And then we'll dive into Redefined and what Redefined is all about.
100%. And thank you. So, my journey starts from India. When I was born and raised, I moved to Canada about 6.5 years ago with, you can say, two suitcases full of dreams and hopes of becoming an XYZ person, right? Whatever that is, we all have that Canadian dream idea that happens. But I think there was this stark contrast I noticed as soon as I landed into Canada, because it felt like as soon as I bought the Starbucks coffee at the airport to taking a cab to my university, I realized how expensive Canada is. And I think at that moment, there was this shift from me idealizing my goals and dreams to now a shift coming on to, hey, I got to make money because my parents have invested so much in me. And I think all those pressures started coming on and being that weight on my shoulders from day one. And I think that's where a lot of the essence of Redefined comes from, is those experiences. Because and initially when I came in my first year, I was working a lot of part-time jobs. I used to work at a pizza place. I in fact used to serve at a lot of Deloitte events as a server. And so it was started as that, but eventually I realized, wait a second, I write this story and I cannot let people around me at that time who were telling me, hey, this is what your people do and continue to do. And that's when I was like, no, that cannot be right. And I think that's when the transition started happening. And then just within 6 months, honestly, of networking and advocating for myself, I've landed a job at all the top four consulting firms, chose Deloitte eventually, started on my journey of advocacy through LinkedIn, ended up becoming a LinkedIn top voice last year, which is just 300 people out of a billion users on LinkedIn, for my work for immigrants, and then started doing TEDx speaking and so on and so forth. So it's been quite a journey.
Wow, that's incredible. That experience alone, just coming here less than 6 years and making a name for yourself and a brand, that is absolutely inspiring. And that's why I'm excited to have you on the show, because here you are, you're realizing the Canadian dream, but not only are you realizing it, you're going out and finding a way to make an impact. So that's absolutely amazing. Now, you touched on the fact that when you first joined or came to Canada, you were doing some volunteer work, and some of that work was with the very organization that you're not employed by. Can you talk a little bit about that journey and that experience and the networking that it took for you to even get into those spaces?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think my journey has been quite of a non-traditional one, right? Because as I mentioned initially, when I came in, I was doing a lot of what people called labor jobs, right? Which was working as a server, so on and so forth. I think when you call it a volunteer, you make it a little more fancy in nature, right? But I think it started off as that. And obviously, if I'm to go to an employer and tell them, hey, I've worked at this restaurant or cafe, it's not like they're going to hire me, right? So I think that's when the realization came in that, okay, and I have no business degree either, just to put it out there. I have a degree in kinesiology, which is like sports science. So completely different than what I do today, which is consulting. But what I knew practically was, if I put myself in an employer's shoes, I need two things from myself. I need experiences that are relevant to the space I'm trying to get into. And B, I need to know what the work looks like. And I need to have been in there, done that work, right? So just speaking sticking on those two themes, I started reaching out to non-for-profit startups and started doing what you would call voluntary work with them, right? Because I was like, it's all about building experiences. So worked with 4 startups and non-for-profits across Canada, US, developed experiences in that space, got my quantifiers, built credibility for myself, and then leveraged LinkedIn to actually share that credibility with others and form those networks in those spaces and those decision-making rooms to then eventually be able to transition without having some sort of a degree in that space, right? And that's how that transition came into being.
I love that. And you are the very definition of what it means to be redefined. And we're going to transition into that topic shortly. But even with the networking and all of the amazing volunteer work that you've been able to do, you were doing that while as a student. How were you able to balance and also to be a LinkedIn top voice? And this is critical because there are young people watching. You know, there's a young person in the studio right now who's listening to this message.
Yeah.
What advice would you be able to give to anyone who's listening and watching this episode?
I think the biggest thing is trust yourself, right? I think especially as immigrants, as people of color, as people who are part of marginalized communities, I always say I think we all have layers to our identity, because most oftentimes than not, when we walk into rooms, it's other people who form assumptions about who we are, our capabilities, based on the stereotypes they've heard about us through social media. And I think that's when we owe it to ourselves to make sure we trust and believe in ourselves first, make sure we show up honestly and authentically, really being proud of the culture, our backgrounds and experiences that we bring to the table. And I feel like honestly, when you do that and you're just transparent and you just focus on bringing value to others and learning from them, people automatically see the difference, right? So I think it's just the combination of having identify what that purpose is, making sure you're ready to put in the effort to fulfill that purpose, and 3 is letting people know around you that you are putting in that effort to reach towards that end goal that you have. I think those combination of those 3 things is the key to any youth today, no matter what color, background, culture, to actually make whatever success looks like happen for them. Yeah.
Brilliant. I love that. And, even being a LinkedIn top voice, what was that thing that set you apart? I mean, LinkedIn is a vast network.
Yes.
What was that unique thing that set you apart for you to be a top voice?
I think it's just authenticity. And I think it's resonating with the audience. I think a year and a half ago when I joined LinkedIn, that time a lot of people were just posting about success stories. Oh, I landed a job, or oh, I won this award, I spoke at this conference, blah, 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 right? And I remember when I initially started feeling like, wow, I've done nothing in life. I'm nowhere close to these people. But that's when I was thinking that day is like, that cannot be the reality. So that's when I started my journey by just sharing the other side of things, right? I spoke about my failures. I spoke about rejections. And I said, hey, guess what? Success is going to be one part of those 5 other opportunities you applied to and did not land. But no one talks about that side, right? People only talk about the successes, right? So I think it started off as that. And then I think I always write my posts also in the moment. Like if I'm feeling frustrated a certain day, I will show that frustration by talking about why is it that we don't get these XYZ opportunities. And I think a lot of my posts actually sometimes have spelling errors in them. But it's because I think it's a part of my brand, because it shows to people that I just write in that moment and I just write how I speak. And I think it's something that helps people know it's Ritika's post than the others. So I think it's just that piece of being honest, not caring about what people are going to say. Because even during COVID, as a quick example, I would say my family took a big hit in terms of our financial standing. And, I had to go back to doing multiple jobs. And I spoke about that. I was like, it is what it is. And I'm sure others are going through it. So I don't care what people think about me, right? Because I was working at Deloitte at that time and people were like, oh, you can't really share that. And I even talk about frictions within the corporate, firms, even though I'm a part of Deloitte. And in fact, they're supportive of it, right? So I think it's just that piece that really resonates with the audience.
That's amazing because you touched on the fact that authenticity in this case is key. Oftentimes when it comes to social media, individuals want to put their best selves out there. You take the selfie and you have to touch it up and make sure that
Yes.
the blemish is gone, the spots are gone, and you'll take time to edit and re-edit and make sure that your sentence is perfect. But here you are talking about being authentically you and how that has resonated so well with your audience. And in fact, I believe you have a following on LinkedIn of over to 50,000. Is that number correct?
Yes, I know the exact number because my dad keeps sending me updates on it. So it's more than 65,000. Yes.
That is incredible. And for someone who just launched or went onto LinkedIn, just a short year and a bit ago. So that is amazing. And, your journey is so inspiring because when I think about, the journey that you have been on, just 6 short years and you've been able to volunteer. Again, you've sat on many boards, not just here in Canada, but globally. In fact, you were part of a UN board. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yes, no, definitely. So I'm on the board of directors for Girl Up, which is a UN affiliated non-for-profit organization. And we have multiple chapters of that here in Canada as well. But since I'm from India, I started off my journey with the Ahmedabad chapter there. And, we do continue to do a lot of work, which is mostly catered towards empowering young women across the globe, specifically on topics around menstrual equity, but also just this idea of advocacy and standing up for themselves. And I think it's a theme I like to continue, not just across that non-for-profit, but even Project Kabul, another organization that I'm board of directors for, and Teenwiser. All of them are mainly focused on empowering the youth by upskilling them and giving them the tools to really advocate for themselves in the market. Because quite honestly, I think the youth today, we many a times say are the leaders of tomorrow, but I think they are the leaders of today, right?
Absolutely.
And the only way we can do that is by showing them what today looks like and giving them the skills they actually need for the real world, not just math, right? Not just biology, but more than that. So
Absolutely. So you're essentially touching on some of the critical life skills that young people need to not only survive, but to thrive in today's world.
exactly.
Incredible. I want to talk a little bit before we're going to come to a break shortly, but I want to touch on something that's absolutely important for me, and it's balance. How do you make time to ensure that you have that balance in the business of all the things that you're doing, the incredible things you're doing?
No, definitely. I always say this one thing, people talk about this concept of work-life balance. I don't think there's a concept like that because you have life and you have work as a part of it, right? So I think what it actually is just prioritization, right? Because I think there are moments in my day where I might be still working at 11 p.m. and maybe I'm not working at 3 p.m., for example, because at every hour, every minute, I think it's all about prioritizing what's most important and essential in that moment. From an ROI perspective, whether that ROI be in terms of personal satisfaction, fulfilling your purpose, monetary ROI, whatever that is for anyone, right? And I think it's about creating that prioritization criteria list for yourself and then just running things through that. So that's actually how I run my days. And there are days where I may not call my parents back home, right? Maybe there are weeks and months that I don't do that call, but it's because I know there's few things that need to be done essentially now to make it happen later. And it might be the opposite as well. So I think for me, it's all about not thinking of it as two separate things,
Love
thinking
that.
of it as the same thing.
That is probably the best explanation of work-life balance I've ever heard. On that note, I'm going to take a short break. We'll be right back with Ritika, and we're going to pick up the conversation talking about Redefined, her social enterprise that she recently started. We'll be right back. Welcome back to In Conversation with Alethia. I'm in the studio with Ritika Saraswat. We just finished talking about work-life balance, and there is no such thing as work-life balance. It's about prioritizing and making sure that you're dedicating time to that ROI, which is one of the best examples of work-life balance I have ever heard, especially coming from a young person. So thank you so much for sharing that, Ritika. I want to take some time now to transition into Redefined, your nonprofit organization that is essentially a social enterprise that you founded in recent years. Can you share a little bit about what Redefined is and its purpose?
Yes, definitely. So Redefined is a non-for-profit organization started about a year and a half ago, with the main idea and the goal being on really like empowering marginalized communities with a specific focus on international students and newcomers, and ensuring that we are equipping them with the tools and the resources and access to individualized network that can really help them advocate for themselves in the market and get opportunities they deserve. I often like to summarize saying there are mainly three avenues we try to touch on. Is the first one being creating an access to a community that is for them by their own people. The second being creating access to individualized resources, right? Because I think there's a lot out there, but there are a few things that speak specifically to that demographic. And the third, last but not the least, is creating an access to upskilling programs and initiatives that are catered to their specific issues that they experience in the job market or in Canada overall, enabling them eventually to get career ready or more so life ready. So that's how I would summarize it.
Okay, and so interesting journey. How did the journey of Redefined come about? Like, what was the impetus for you starting the organization?
I think a lot of it came from my own experiences initially. I think as someone who comes from a collectivistic culture, we have a tendency sometimes to blame ourselves for the experiences we have. So when I initially came to Canada, as I was mentioning, when I started doing multiple of these part-time jobs, your experiences aren't always positive, right? I had managers who I was working with who uh, were fairly created negative work environments, were maybe abusive at times in terms of the language they use, not respectful, etc. And I remember thinking it was only me and me being the reason behind those experiences. But it was when I actually started talking to other international students that I realized, wait a second, this seems to be a consistent theme across, whether it be with experiences with landlords or with the employers they're working at, even as sometimes at the university and colleges in terms of the experiences with other counterparts. So that's when I was like, okay, this is not just a me issue, this is an entire community's issue. And that's when I knew we got to do something about it. So that's when Redefine was conceptualized with the whole idea of helping them so that they don't have to go through what I went through, and they don't need to take 2 years figuring things out as it took me. So that was the whole idea.
That's amazing. And so you started off initially as a nonprofit, and I believe you've since transitioned into a social enterprise. If that's correct, can you talk about that transition and what it was like?
Yes, yeah, we are currently still, I would say, are still transitioning into a social enterprise. And I think a big reason being because we realized we're being able to create all of this impact, which is great, but I think there's a potential in taking this further, right? What would help us make a more sustainable impact is making sure we create some sort of an ROI for people to be a part of this initiative along with us as well, right? Like as a non-for-profit, most of the people that work with us are volunteers, right? Whether it be professionals or students themselves, for whom this is a side of desk thing, right? Even for myself, right? So our goal is that in order to eventually hit that goal of impacting 250,000 people by the end of 2025 and creating a sustainable impact, which we hope to do through our organization, we got to really make sure we have resources on hand full time, really hitting it on the ground every single day to make things happen. So that's how the transition to social enterprises came in. And that's where we've started really focusing on building collaborations with corporate organizations, seeking sponsors, connecting with the government, getting grants, and so on and so forth. So that's where the transition came from.
Incredible. Now, running a nonprofit is not easy. So I imagine that you have a large team supporting you, whether that be your board of directors, volunteers. What is that team like, and how large is your team?
Yes, no. So initially, I would say for the longest time, it was just a one-man army, me. But I think it's about, I would say, like not that long ago, 8 to 12 months ago, is when we actually started formalizing our team structure. So we operate in the model whereby we have national and regional chapters, but then we also have institutional chapters. So within Toronto itself, for example, we have 5 clubs across different universities and colleges. But at the same time, we have our regional chapter team as well, So all of these combined makes up a team of 35 people in Toronto itself. And again, the team in Vancouver and Halifax are different in their sizes depending upon the number of clubs and chapters we have based out of there. So that's usually how our model works like. We also have teams based out of India and even Ghana as well, because that's where we do a lot of our impact initiatives in terms of giving back to a lot of the underprivileged communities in India, Pakistan, and Ghana.
Oh my goodness, I am absolutely amazed at the impact that you're having. And speaking of impact, I read that you've been able to impact, is it 30,000 students globally so far?
Yes.
Wow. And so walk me through that journey, the impacts that you've been able to make up with those 30,000 students. Is it just through the universities, or what is that network like?
Yes, no, definitely. So I think it's a combination of a few things, right? And it's because I think the way we operate as well, we are always excited by different initiatives and how we can just keep giving back and getting involved. So I think where the 30,000 number comes from is beyond just the students, because in Canada only, we have a community of 50,000 immigrants across different cities and universities, colleges, which is on LinkedIn, WhatsApp groups, our Instagram, so all across all our social medias. But beyond that, when I talk about the impact piece, this is we're referring to a lot of the communities who have benefited from the programs and the initiatives that we run from a long-term perspective. So even the cities, the countries I was mentioning, like India, Ghana, and Pakistan, we actually have schools that are running there, which we like fund through our efforts and through the events that we do, which is on average like 1,000-2,000 students every month, right? So I think that is the other piece to it. And then here in Canada, it's more of the upskilling, right? So it's a combination of, I think, upskilling and creating accessibility as well that we do to those students.
And you've been able to do that in just 12 short months. That is awe-inspiring. That is worthy of praise. And I'm going to give you your flowers right now.
Thank you.
This is absolutely incredible. And I want to touch on, the fact that, the 1,000 students and those schools that you're funding. Can you walk me through what that funding process looks like, and tangible, what that impact is like? Is it, for example, providing products, or is it providing education, tools? What does that look like for those schools outside of Canada?
Great question. So I think I'll break it down per country wise. So for example, in India, specifically in Ajmer and Rajasthan, we converted a school bus into a mobile school for students. Because what we realized is, I forgot the exact name of the person, which is not good at all, but there is someone based out of Ajmer who is collaborating with our team, and he knows the community very well. So he helped us, and I actually visited India about 6 months ago, and I went to see that school bus as well that we built, which was a really amazing experience. And so there are a lot of like students living on the streets there, like a lot of the youth, and begging is a big profession there. So our goal was, how do we help these students get into government schools that are providing them with free access to education? So that's when we started this concept of mobile schools, where we pick them up from their classic areas of trade, you could say, where they go on the streets and start raising money, and get them into the buses, even if it's for 30 minutes, put in a movie that educates them and empowers them on who they can become, or read a book to them on those concepts, slowly introducing the idea. And I think on average, what we have found, a student ends up spending 2 years in those school buses before they can actually go into and pass the examinations to get into a government school. So that's what our goal is in Ajmer specifically. So that's what that piece looks like. And then what we do in Ghana, for example, is for one of the schools that exist there, they needed equipment to build up the school, because that school was technically just some sort of a what do you say, like bricks and just like nothing. It didn't look like a school, let's just say that, right? With students sitting on the grounds, they did not have access to boards, nothing. It was mostly vocal. So that's where we came in, raised funds through our fundraisers. And a lot of the events that we do, they're actually paid towards students here. So they pay an average of $5 to $10, right, for each event. And through all that money we raise, and with the sponsorship money, we're actually able to fund those initiatives, because things are very cheap. People, that's what they don't realize, how easy it is to create an impact. Like one chair for a student there is $1, right? So imagine we can spend $5 on a coffee, but if we just invest $1, that could mean access to one child to one school, which is insane if you think about that, right? So that is another piece that has been helping us there.
That is a powerful impact statement. And if it's not on your website, I hope it is somewhere on your website.
It is, yeah.
Of $1 Canadian, that less than a cup of coffee, right? And you're able to
Yeah.
impact the life of a student, providing them with education. So absolutely incredible. And I love everything that, you've been doing. I'm curious to find out, so with all of the network that you have, how are you attracting people to the program? Is it just from advertising or through the network of clubs that you have in different universities and colleges?
I would say even till today, about 70 to 80% of it is happening through my LinkedIn. And not just through the LinkedIn, but I think it's the direct and the indirect impact. The direct impact through the LinkedIn, but the indirect impact being, so whenever we have events happening, all of the attendees that come to the event, or almost 85% of the attendees, post about it on LinkedIn, and they will tag Redefine, they will tag myself, right? And then we hype up their posts as well. So I think it is that natural mechanism of marketing that occurs, which I think is just allowing us to gain that traction. Because recently we hosted an event at Deloitte, actually, called the Newcomers Summit, which was held in the Deloitte office. And Deloitte was like, oh, it's usually tricky for us to even get like 100 people to sign up for these events, right? And then I posted on LinkedIn, and a few of my other team members, we posted on LinkedIn. Within 12 hours, we had 1,500 people registered for the conference. Amazing. Or the summit that we organized. And that was shocking to me as well, because but that proves the point that people want the opportunities. It's just about getting it to them through the right medium. Because here, if we invested on Google Ads, you're not going to find a lot of the youth looking for jobs there, right? You're going to find them right at their doorstep on LinkedIn, right? So I think it was just that piece that helps us, that natural marketing.
Perfect. I love that. And, I hate to end our conversation, but we're coming towards the end of the show. And I have to ask you one final question. In 30 seconds, where do you see yourself in the future? Tough question.
Oh my God. Yeah. A very tough question. I would say I definitely see myself in a space like being a leader in the space of helping newcomers and immigrants. I think where I'm at today is not what you would call a leader. When I mean a leader, as someone who's actually able to bring a lot of sustainable impact for more than 1 million, 5 million newcomers. So that's what I see. Very vague answer, but maybe on the covers of Forbes 30 under 30 as well, for sure. That's on my bucket list. And yes, let's just put it at that.
Listen, I love everything. So Forbes 30 under 30, and to be able to impact lives, 5 million people, I heard. So 5 million immigrants, that is absolutely powerful. So Ritika, it has been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.